Today we're going to talk about the 3 ways to value a business. Now, not all 3 of these approaches are utilized to the same extent in practice. However, each one will give you a certain framework or a certain lens to think about value of a business and valuation of an enterprise. So the first of these is a discounted cash flow analysis. So basically, you can think of a business as the future cash flow that it is projected to throw off. So you have 2024, 2025, 2026, so on and so forth. And if you could project out, say, 10 years of cash flow for a business, and then apply some sort of an exit value to the business at year 11, and discount all of that back to the current day at a certain interest rate, what would be the present value? And so when you hear concepts like the time value of money, net present value, the discounted cash flows, or the discount rate, all of this really boils down to an interest rate. And so in a discounted cash flow analysis, what you do is you set an interest rate. And so think of that as the required return for an investment to be good at the risk level it's at. And so round numbers, as an example, if the risk-free rate or the rate of a treasury bond is 5%, and you said that you needed a 10% annual premium over the risk-free rate for the risk of a private investment, perhaps the proper discount rate would be 15%. Historically, it's in that range of 15 to 25% for the lower middle market, but let's assume 15%. The analysis of a discounted cash flow is basically saying, if I discount all of the future cash flows at that rate of 15%, what is it worth today? If you said the company is going to throw off this much cash and have this ultimate value at the end of the day, if you discount it back at the required rate of return, what is the value today? So if you can take away anything from a DCF or discounted cash flow analysis, you're determining what is the present value based on a certain necessary return on investment. This can sometimes be more of an academic approach. There's a lot of variables that can really warp the conclusion one way or the other. However, it's worth understanding because you will hear that net present value or discounted cash flow in conversations about value. And really what you need to know is that is the process of projecting out cash flows long into the future, discounting them back at the required return, and saying, what's the present value? So something to keep in mind as you're having conversations with people, if they're talking about discount rates and this and that, you say, well, what's the present value we think it's going to be worth? The second lens, it's called an internal rate of return. You might hear the acronym IRR. And so basically people are saying, what is the internal rate of return? And so in this situation, you're doing a similar exercise of projecting out cash flows for the future, in addition to assuming a certain exit value 5, 7, 10 years down the road. But in this situation, what you're solving for is the rate. So you will plug in a purchase price and you say, if this is the purchase price of X, and over time there are Y cash flows and Z exit value, if I were to say that this dollar in, this purchase price yielded this many dollars out, what is the implied rate of return? So the difference between a DCF and an IRR analysis is, in a DCF analysis, you are solving for the present value. In an IRR, you are projecting cash flows out with an implied or an assumed present value or purchase price, and you are figuring out what the rate of return is or what the interest rate is. And again, the analysis is oftentimes for the same concept. If the required rate of return is 15 or 20%, and in this projection, you can toggle the purchase price up or down. Going down, the returns will go higher. Going up, the returns will go lower. And the purpose of it is that it allows someone to back into how much they could possibly pay for something to generate an adequate return based on certain projected cash flows and exit value. Now again, IRR is similar to DCFs. Lots of inputs, lots of outputs, more applicable in certain situations than others. However, keep it in mind because it is an acronym you'll hear, and our goal with a lot of these videos is we don't want any client of ours or company owners, whether they're clients of ours or otherwise, to enter into any situations and feel like the jargon's over their head or that there's certain terminology that they don't understand or certain concepts. While there's no reason you'll have to undertake any of these analysis on your own, it is good to be aware of what they mean. And so lastly, and the most applicable relative to the middle market, lower middle market transaction, are EBITDA multiples. And so you can think of EBITDA, as we've discussed in other videos, we'll put a screenshot here, is effectively the proxy or the approximation of the cash flow generating power of a business. And you can think of an EBITDA multiple as the inverse of a yield. So what do we mean by this simply? If someone is buying a company for 5 times EBITDA, they're effectively buying a 20% annual return. And so oftentimes in middle market and lower middle market acquisitions, the most common multiple we will see is 6x EBITDA. And so what that means is 6 times EBITDA, or conversely, 1/6 is the implied rate of return. So this being 16 2/3%. And so it's interesting, but you can see the consistency through all of these things is that if 6 times is the most common multiple in the middle market or lower middle market, it does substantiate the idea that the target IRR for most acquisitions is around that 15% range, perhaps a little higher baking in the exit. And similarly, the DCF discount rate applied is oftentimes, again, within that 15 to 20% range. And so multiples oftentimes are a shorthand that really encapsulate all of the valuation metrics, all of the valuation methodologies. So we hope that provides or sheds some light on different ways companies are valued. Now, 2 of them being a little more complicated, a little more academic in certain ways, and the third being the most applicable way, the most common vernacular or lexicon that you will hear in the middle market or lower middle market, M&A, investment banking, private equity space is going to be multiples of EBITDA. But understanding the concepts of discounting cash flows back to the present at a certain rate, understanding the determination of a rate of return that will substantiate a particular investment helps you understand what does the multiple even mean, why is it relevant, and really the simplest way to think of that is 10 times multiple implies a 10% annual return. A 5 times multiple implies a 20% annual return. Any annual return between 10 and 20% that substantiates an investment will be some multiple between 5 and 10 times. And so that's the thought for today. 3 ways to value a company, which one's most applicable, which ones you should still understand so that you're always in the position of power, always in the position of leverage, that no one's going to speak over your head, and that there's not going to be any jargon, that even if you don't feel like partaking, you at least know what it means. And so that's the thought. Keep pushing forward. Hope the week's off to a good start for everyone. God bless. See you next time.